every time the Kings have an opportunity to go on a little win streak and separate themselves, or at least give themselves a little bit of breathing room in the Western Conference, they always seem to come out and lose to a subpar, sub 500 team at home. And this was just another one of those occasions. Now, this game wasn't as bad of a loss as like a Charlotte Hornets who were without a bunch of players, without the Pistons, without Cade, almost the Spurs without Wembanyama. It's not quite at that tier of a loss. I think the Rockets played well and we have to give them credit for that. But it still is a bad loss, and the Kings continue to play with fire where they don't take advantage of these opportunities that are presented to them. And they always seem to find a way to, make up for it, or keep themselves afloat by then performing well in games against better teams or in just, tougher games on the road. But I just feel at some point it's gonna come back to bite them. If you play with fire, eventually you're gonna get burned. And so you have this now back to back against the Lakers and the Bucks. It's like that's a super tough back to back. Now, going by the trends, the Kings will either win one or both of those games. But I just feel like if at some point, you know, they're not going to come away with the wins in the games against better teams or against the teams that are around them in the Western Conference. And it's almost kind of sad that I have to preface things by saying, well, this loss wasn't quite as bad as those ones against Charlotte and Detroit, right? Because the Kings have had so many of those just awful losses that this one seems a little easier to swallow. But I will say, for all the Kings' woes at home and such, they always seem to be leading at halftime. And it's because they're always blowing these leads. But shout out to the Kings for at least leading at halftime, which means I get my free Mountain Mike's pizza. And so at least they keep me happy in that sense, because the day after the game I get to go and get some pizza. And before we really get into this game, I just want to say I'm hoping that Alperen Şengün is okay, because he took that really bad fall. That looked really bad on his leg. And with the amount of time left in this season, just with the way it looked, it feels like that's probably a season ending injury. And he's been so good for them this season. And so that's a really rough one for the Rockets if they lose him, because it's been such a great season for him. But getting into this game, the Kings, they played really well in the first half, I thought, or at least the first 20, 22 minutes. And then those last 2 or 3 minutes were not so great. They didn't do a good job of closing out that second quarter strong. And it gave the Rockets momentum that they took into that third quarter. And the Rockets absolutely capitalized on that. But before that, the last 2 minutes of the first half, I thought the Kings played great. I thought the defense was on point. They were rotating well. They were collapsing in on the paint. They were getting their hands in passing lanes, having high hands. Like everything was good. They didn't get stops, on every possession, but I thought there were a lot of possessions where even when the Rockets did score, the Kings still could come away from that possession and be like, proud of how they played defense. Cam Whitmore, he made some tough shots at the start of that second quarter to keep the Rockets kind of within striking distance. But then offensively, the Kings were flowing as well. I thought both Domas and Fox had really good first halves. I think the only thing that wasn't great about Fox's first half was how many 3-point shots he was taking, and especially how many pull-up 3-point shots he was taking. He missed, I think, 3 pull-up threes in the first half and then went on to miss more in the second half. I don't think he definitely did not hit a pull-up three in this game. But then he went 2 for 2 in the first half on his catch and shoot threes. And so that's the one area where, his 3-point percentage has dropped from earlier in the season. I think he's at 36% now. And he can be a good shooter, but it's just about knowing which shots are the right ones for him. And those pull-up threes, I just don't like how many he's taking. Every time he takes a catch and shoot three, I'm totally good with it. If he gets a bunch of wide open looks on catch and shoot threes, then he should fire away. But I don't like the pull-up threes, especially misses the first one, missed the second one, missed a pull-up mid-ranger. It's like, okay, your shot's not going. You need to start getting inside. But other than that, he had a good and still efficient first half, and I think that shows how well he was doing inside the three-point arc. Even though he was missing some threes, he still had a pretty efficient first half, and things were flowing. Sabonis's stat line in the first quarter was amazing, and when Fox went out of the game, Sabonis went from playmaker to play finisher. He was finishing around the rim, being aggressive at Şengün, and the Rockets were leaving Şengün on an island against Sabonis. And I think Sabonis took what the defense was giving him and didn't force anything, but was still being aggressive. And he had some turnovers in the first half, but I didn't feel like those turnovers were really the bad variety of turnovers, or at least most of them. They were the type of turnovers that were him trying to do something productive in a good way, him trying to push the pace. But I think that changed in the second half. His turnovers, although I think he had less turnovers in the second half, I think he had 5 in the first half, which was kind of wild. It didn't feel like it. There were 4 in the second half, but I thought it was a different variety of turnover, and it was the type of turnover that I kind of was dreading coming into this game, because I talked earlier about how I didn't want Sabonis to start forcing things inside against this Rockets team, because I could just envision these exact types of turnovers where in the second half, the Kings offense really stagnated. And so Domas tried to take it upon himself to really create things, and the Rockets started sending bodies at him, and the Kings shooters forgot how to shoot, which wasn't very helpful. But I think even with guys not hitting those shots, Sabonis should still be moving the ball and not trying to force things inside. And at one point, it just felt like he was just throwing the ball away in that third quarter. And so I just thought the turnovers in the first half were a much different variety than the turnovers in the second half. The first half ones were ones that you can live with. The second half ones were a result of bad offense from both Domas himself and the entire team. And because Sabonis is kind of the center of the entire offense, those two things kind of go hand in hand. The Kings weren't shooting well from deep in the first half, and they weren't shooting well. I think they had hit 4 threes, and they built a 13-point lead. And so, if they're hitting their threes, then that could have ballooned to even way more. But that's the thing with this team. I want to be able to enjoy them building a lead the right way, even when they're not hitting their 3-point shots. But then I know they never seem to be the type of team where then all of a sudden in the second half, they'll start hitting their 3-point shots while continuing to play the same way in every other aspect of the game, so that they can then blow the team out or, win by a considerable margin. But more often than not, if the Kings continue to shoot badly throughout a game, we get more of what happened in this game. The Kings just really struggle to win in games where they don't shoot well from 3. And, the same can be said for almost every team. And to be fair, I think almost every game that they've lost post All-Star break has been more due to their defense than their offense. And I felt like this was kind of the one game where the offense was more of the problem. But I also think this game kind of gave me flashbacks to the playoffs, where all 3 of your shooters in the starting lineup cannot hit a shot, where you have Barnes 0 of 1 from 3, Keegan 0 of 5, and Herter 0 for 3. And then even off the bench, you have Lyles not even attempting a 3. You have Keon going 0 for 3, Monk 2 for 8. And the only guy that could hit him was Davion at 2 for 5. Davion's our sharpshooter now. And so the Kings just really are not going to win a game when all of those guys are struggling from 3. And I really think we just have to hope that the Kings have their role players hitting 3s come playoff time or come the end of the season, play in, whatever it is. And I think credit definitely has to be given to Houston's defense. They played physically, and they're a good defensive team. They have a lot of good defensive players. They get after it for sure. And the Kings, they looked to get the ball to Harrison Barnes in the post a lot, especially I think when the offense was struggling a bit. And to some degree it worked, where they would get the matchup and he was drawing a lot of fouls in the post. with those mismatches. And so, in that way, it was successful. But I also think in another way, it kind of played straight into Houston's hands where they want to play a very physical, defensive game of basketball. And the Kings want to play a game that's more free flowing and fast and an offensive game. And so posting up Barnes and kind of stagnating the offense or going to the free throw line a bunch, I think that more plays into the hands of the Rockets. You could see the Kings definitely try to get Keegan Murray involved early because he had been struggling lately. I think he had, 3 points last game, something like that. And so he scored 5 points early and he had 13 points on the game. But his shooting struggles continued. I already said his 3-point percentage, 0 for 5 from 3, 3 for 11 from the field, and he missed some very open looks and he missed some threes badly. He continues to shoot it well at the free throw line, though, 7 for 7, and free throws have not been a problem for the Kings lately. So, good signs there, I guess. But Keegan's shot, it looks way off. In the first quarter alone, he had 3 shots where he was pretty much wide open, and he missed all of them. In the first half, the Kings were able to keep Şengün quiet. I think Sabonis played really good defense on him. He blocked him on a jumper once. Sabonis had 3 steals, 2 blocks. He was really good defensively. They were able to keep Jalen Green quiet in the first half, which was big. And I thought the Kings played physically, defensively. They got deflections. And they just weren't letting the Rockets get to the rim easily or without getting bumped. And then that just fell apart in the last 2 minutes. And you saw the Rockets get to the rim with ease a couple times. Van Vliet hit a couple of tough shots, tough threes, and the Rockets were able to pull within 5. And then in the third quarter, that just continued. And the Kings were not able to hit their shots. Kevin Huerter picked up his 4th foul, and so he came out early in the third quarter. Keon Ellis came in for him, and Keon was not able to knock down. I think earlier I said Keon was 0 for 3 from 3. He was actually only 0 for 1, but obviously not getting the looks. And the Kings' turnovers absolutely did not help the defense. The Rockets got out. They were running in transition and scoring on the fast break. And then the Kings started to get picked apart in the pick and roll. They were getting killed from the dunker spot. Even when the Kings were containing the guard in the pick and roll, they would always get it into the middle of the floor to whether it be Şengün or Jock Landale. It didn't matter. And they were constantly getting it down to the dunker spot. And having Harrison Barnes out there defensively definitely does not help that because he's just not good defensively in those moments. He's not mobile enough. He's not athletic enough. He's not long enough to try to break up those plays. And so the Kings just got picked apart in that sense. And like I talked about, the offense stagnating, Fox forcing things from deep. He went 2 for 9 from 3 on the game, and he only had 1 assist. And a lot of times you can see that those things are correlated, his 3-point attempts to his assists, because when he's taking those 3-point shots, he's not getting into the lane and creating for others. And then even after Fox, later in the third quarter into the fourth quarter, he started to be more aggressive towards the rim, and then he was just missing shots that you just don't normally see him miss. It just wasn't a good night for him from the field. He went 7 for 21 on 18 points. The Kings were running a lineup out there with Davion, Monk, Keon, Keegan, and Sabonis. And they went to that in the first quarter, and the offense kind of stagnated with Monk just kind of dribbling around. Monk wasn't great in the first quarter, and then he kind of turned it on in the second quarter. And a similar thing happened in the third quarter as to the first quarter, where the offense stagnated. The problem was that the offense already had been stagnant for the first part of the third quarter. And so it really was just a continuation of that. Where at one point, Fox came out. They didn't even bring Monk in. And the offense already wasn't going anywhere. You're like, how are we going to score with this? They quickly brought in Monk after that, but still, it wasn't the greatest time offensively. Davion, he made a couple threes, went to the rim and made a nice play, getting a layup. Lyles towards the end of the third was getting to the rim and getting to the free throw line. Keegan even got to the free throw line 7 times, which isn't normal for him. In the first half, one of those was he just got bailed out. on a 3-point foul with like 1 second on the shot clock. And so at the end of the third, the Kings started to get to the rim a little bit more, but it really wasn't enough. And they scored 14 points in the quarter as a whole. I thought one possession that kind of summed up the Kings offense was when the Kings were kind of struggling to get anything offensively, and then finally Keegan gets freed up from three, and he has a pretty open look. And he didn't even look at the rim. And he just passes it on to the next guy, and that was with like 7-8 seconds left on the shot clock, and the Kings go nowhere. And it was either a shot clock violation or like an air ball into a Rockets player's hands. I can't remember. But I think that's where Keegan's confidence from beyond the arc is right now. And that was just kind of where the Kings offense as a whole was at that point. Alex Len only played 5 minutes, and it was really because the Kings were just trying to get something going offensively, so they went to Lyles at the 5. I thought Monk had a solid game, scoring wise, 8 for 16, 5 assists, second on the team with 20 points. And so, he had a solid scoring game. Sabonis went 10 for 11 from the field. Fox had 18 very inefficiently. And then outside of that, just nobody could score. In the first half, I felt like it was very much the Kings couldn't score as much because they were just missing some open shots. In that third quarter, though, they got swarmed by that Rockets defense, and it wasn't even close. The only bright spot of that third quarter was the Kings winning another challenge. Mike Brown recently, he's been winning his challenges, won an out of bounds call. But that was about it. In coming into the fourth quarter, I'm thinking, all right, the Kings still got a shot in this. And then immediately Amen Thompson comes out and hits a corner three. I'm like, yeah, this is chalked. It's over. The Kings didn't hit a three in the third quarter, and they hit 4 in the first half, 2 in the second half. They shot 6 for 32, 18.8% from 3. They tried to go to the zone that they've been using pretty frequently lately to try to disrupt the Rockets, and that actually went pretty well. They were using Herder at the top, and I thought that worked well. Keegan and Domas down low for a large portion of the time that they were in that zone. And I thought both Domas and Keegan did a really good job of contesting around the rim and making things tough. And I think they went to that because they were just getting killed in the paint in the third quarter. The Rockets definitely got some offensive rebounds because the Kings were in that zone, but I think for the most part it did actually work. And the Kings got within 7 with about 4 minutes left. Keegan had a chance in transition at a 3 that would have blown the roof off Golden One Center, and he airballed it. The comeback attempt was solid, but it was a little too little, too late. Jabari Smith hit a nice mid-ranger. Şengün got Keegan on him in the middle of the paint and scored over him. And those were kind of the two killers where the Kings were getting a bunch of stops in a row finally, but then they got those two and it felt like it was pretty much over from there. That Malik Monk jump ball versus Jabari Smith Jr. though was pretty funny because the ref, it looked like he just threw it really early and Bari was not ready and Malik won it. But the Kings could not capitalize off that. And Monk was big in the fourth quarter of trying to get us back into it, especially with Fox struggling. But then Jalen Green hit a 3. And like I said, too little, too late. Keegan also looked like he got injured. He was limping off, which is not a good sign. I think this was a loss that I can live with for the Kings. It isn't in that tier of the worst losses of the year. Not being able to hit a 3 for this team is it's killer. And that is a worry going forward. One of Katie's keys to the game was hitting 15 plus threes because she was like, we need to see the Kings get going from 3-point range towards the end of the season. And she's right. And then the Kings go 6 for 32. And so it's definitely worrying. But if it is just kind of a one-off of no one could hit a shot in this game, then it is a loss you can live with, but still annoying how the Kings always seem to get out to leads and then just play a bad quarter and it's a 20-point swing. I mentioned it before, but now the Kings play at home versus Milwaukee and then on a back-to-back against the Lakers. So the Kings trying to avenge that heartbreaking loss in Milwaukee where they didn't hit free throws, and then Dame hit a logo 3 to win it. Milwaukee has looked very vulnerable despite them having a better record as of late. They've looked vulnerable, and the Kings played them well last time. But one thing I do know is the Kings are going to have to hit threes against them because it's tough to score inside against a team with 2 7-footers if you can't draw them out to the 3-point line. Really, the Kings' next 3 games are pretty tough against Milwaukee, Los Angeles, and then New York. And then things get a little easier, but you definitely want to see the Kings go at least 4-2 on this homestand. But there is that worry that finally the Kings are not going to have things go their way and not come out and beat these better teams, and things are finally going to kind of fall apart because they've just given themselves so many opportunities to be able to put themselves in a great position to get the 6th seed, and then they just, or at a top 6 seed, and then they just come out and lose these games. Now the teams that they're competing against are kind of doing the same, but I do not want to see a play-in game, and I especially do not want to see a 9-10 play-in game for the Kings. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back on Tuesday to recap the game against Milwaukee. Peace.